Welcome to the Life on Your Terms podcast with me, your host, Tracey Liv Howard. My intention is that each episode helps you remember who you are and serves to inspire and support you to reach your most important goals and live life on your terms. Let's get into today's episode. Being a rebel isn't bad. It's a requirement for an extraordinary life. Most people think of being a rebel as bad or negatively, that if we actively rebel against authority or our family or a teacher, that we are somehow wrong. Well, let me tell you a story about Martha Beck. Martha is a true rebel. Martha grew up in the Mormon church in Utah, which was a completely closed society with its own rules and rituals. Unfortunately, Martha was chronically sexually abused in that community and was asked to stay silent in order to maintain the order and hierarchy of that community. After much grappling, as Martha got older, she decided to leave the Mormon church. And this meant she was leaving her entire family and way of life behind. Her mother, her father, her siblings, her friends. Banishment is how the Mormon community works when anyone decides to leave the faith. Martha was in a marriage and developed a crippling disease that left her bedridden for years. She jokes that she had her 3 children and raised them on her bed. And she also at this time got 3 Harvard degrees. Whilst bedridden, Martha earned up to her PhD from Harvard. And as Martha continued to awaken to her truth, she decided to leave her marriage. She had left her religion. She left her old life behind and decided that it would be okay, and maybe even her birthright, to find her own way in this lifetime and stand on her own 2 feet. Well, Martha, as you just heard, had channeled the rebel in her several times in order to change and potentially save her own life. And maybe like me, you're happy for Martha. You hear this story and you think, I'm so glad that she stood up to this, the old tribal patterns, the old way of working, things that were bad for her, and decided to do what was good for her. Well, good, because this is an example of the rebel in the light, the positive side of rebelling. It doesn't mean that it's easy. I can only imagine the nightmare of what rebelling did to Martha. But she was strong enough to handle the consequences, and she knew that she had to do it to save her own life. And so, what is the rebel? How do we define it? What does it mean if you walk out off this episode and you think, wow, I need to rebel in my life, okay? So what does it mean? Carolyn Myss has a book called Sacred Contracts, which I highly recommend you read. I'm going to read a brief description about the rebel from her website. Carolyn says, our images of the rebel may be too closely aligned with cliches of youth culture to let us see the deeper significance of this valuable archetype. Someone like Martin Luther King or artists like Van Gogh, we're all rebels in that it is a key component of all human growth and development. The rebel in a support group can be a powerful aid in helping the group break out of old tribal patterns. The rebel can help you see past tired preconceptions in your field of professional or creative endeavors. The rebel can also lead you to reject any systems, which could be spiritual or professional, that do not serve your inner need for direct union with the divine and can help you to seek more appropriate paths. Carolyn said that the rebel is part of us and that we should pay attention to its urgings. Now, there are the shadow side of the rebel, or the negatives, that we may rebel out of peer pressure that might not be good for us, or we might rebel and be mired in just, she said, another way to conform is just to be in rebellion. And the shadow rebel may also reject legitimate authority simply because we don't like what they're asking us to do. So she said, be mindful of the rebel inside of you. And I would say we want to rebel in the light. We want to rebel consciously, with clear intention, and for the highest good, like Martha did. Martin Luther King, he rebelled against legitimate government policies, the way things were going in the United States related to racial segregation and crimes based on the color of your skin. He rebelled and said no. And Martin was part of breaking an old tribal pattern within the country, breaking the way we've always done things around here, from slavery up to the Civil War and then passed into the 1900s. He was saying there's still progress we need to make. The old way isn't working. And so we see him as a rebel also in the light, in many ways. And for you're listening to this podcast because you definitely have things that you're being called to rebel against. One of my clients is actively rebelling against consumerism and doesn't need the next upgrade on her car and doesn't need to keep up with the Joneses and have all of this stuff on the outside to somehow conform and keep up with an American standard. So she's rebelling in the light to say, I don't want that. That's not for me. And maybe I could do something else. And she often takes more vacations and holidays and trips with her money, as well as she pays for a cook, which people thought was ridiculous. Why would you hire a cook? She said, but that is something that's true for me. And so for you, whether it's you're rebelling professionally, rebelling within an old pattern in your marriage, rebelling against how things might be done in your religion or in the education system, where in your life are you being called to rebel? And is there anything that you're in an active state of rebellion in? Are you actively rebelling something? And I want to let you know it's okay to rebel. Pay attention to where in your life you're being urged to rebel against the way things were, the way we always do things. It's actually extremely needed sometimes. And I want you to find comfort in this. You might not have comfort from a lot of people around you, but neither did Martha. She didn't have anyone to lean on to tell her, you know what, you're doing the right thing. So I want to say, if it's for the light, if it's for your own highest good, and if it's for you to act on your truth, you are doing the right thing in this moment in time. So channel the rebel inside of you. There's no progress without being a rebel. So remember, it's a requirement for an extraordinary life.
A big thank you for listening to this episode. I truly hope you got what you needed. If you want to get more from me each week, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any episodes or bonus content. To be notified of new episodes, workshop opportunities, and more, subscribe to my email list by heading to the link in this episode description. I'm wishing you joy, happiness, and love.